Hey everyone, how's it going? My name's Eric Hill, and my presentation is on misleading advertisements and how they can be considered unethical. So first off, I'm going to share what it is and my thoughts on it. So, what is misleading advertisement? Well, misleading advertisement or false advertisement, it refers to any published claim or advertising material that gives consumers a false hope or understanding of a product or service that's being offered. My personal opinions on it is it's something that should never happen. If a product or service is being sold, then it needs to 100% be the truth of what's selling. If a consumer buys that product and then sees that it's not at all what it was being advertised as, I think that a consumer should be able to sue and get money for it. There needs to be serious consequences to this because companies are going to see that and they're going to say, okay, we can't do that, or else we're going to end up like that other company that tried that and now they're down under because they pushed a false advertisement. It's something that deserves serious consequences. And if a company thinks about doing it, then they really need to benefit or outweigh the pros and cons. Most of the time, it's never going to be good. So I'm looking at two approaches to this. First approach, deontology approach. Now, deontology can be described as judging an action as being right or wrong instead of the consequences from that action. So, misleading advertisement and deontology is something that really doesn't mix because deontologists would look at it as the duty or responsibility of said company to promote the product as what it is instead of something they're trying to make it out to be. So, if a consumer buys that product, it needs to 100% be what it is and not something that the product maker pushed and it ends up being something else. It fits very well into misleading advertisement because it can be considered wrong as it misleads people into buying a product that it isn't being what it's advertised as. Companies have the duty and responsibility to make sure that the product they're selling is 100% safe and it needs to be what they are advertising and not something that is misled. The second approach I'm going to be talking about is utilitarianism. So basically, it's a concept that believes the actions of something needs to be good for the majority of people. Um, for misleading advertisement, it can mostly be considered bad, but there are some cases where it could be considered good, and I'll get into that later on. But a company has to make sure that it has the responsibility, and it knows this, that the product they're pushing needs to be 100% truthful, and whatever they are selling needs to make sure, or a company needs to make sure that there's no bad side effects to it, really. And if there are, it's not to everybody, because a utilitarian would look at this approach and say, okay, what is it doing for people, like majority of people in society? If it's good, they really won't bat too much of an eye at it. Yeah, it's misleading advertisement, but it did good for majority of people. And so they'll look at short-term and long-term benefits of it. In the short term, they'll say, okay, hey, this is doing very good for everybody or for most people. Therefore, it was the right decision to mislead your consumers because it was doing good and it did good. And same thing with the long term. But where they would disagree is, let's say they misled a product and the utilitarian approach would look at it and say, okay, this is not at all good for society. Majority of people are struggling because of this product, and the company has the duty of making sure that it does the most good for people. And so they'd see that and they'd say, this isn't good. This needs to be changed because it was being misled. and they just generally would not agree with it. Some examples. So a good example of a utilitarian, in my opinion, would be a weight loss product. A company could falsely advertise a product or a pill that would say, hey, you're going to lose 20 pounds in 2 weeks, which is very likely to not happen. After a while, people would notice that it's not helping at all, and it turned out to be a scam. Therefore, it doesn't benefit the majority of people. A utilitarian would agree that this was a bad decision, it was the wrong decision, and it's unethical. There's no trust, and people would eventually start suing. A good deontology example would be a product being labeled as organic, even though it's not. The company has the duty and responsibility to make sure that product is being labeled what it is instead of something else. So if a product was manufactured and bioengineered as something, let's say chips, a deontologist would look at it and say, this is wrong because it's labeled as organic chips when it's not. They would never agree with it. It would be considered unethical in their eyes, and it would cause a heap of trouble. Both of these promote, good and a duty of responsibility to society, making sure that people don't get harmed in the making. Some more examples. Personally, one I find is The Last of Us Part 2. It's a video game in a series that just came out on HBO a couple years ago. In the second trailer that was dropped, the devs decided to play a scene where a character, Joel, who is the main character in the first game, shows up, which later is revealed in the game that he was never in that scene. Joel ends up dying 2 hours into the game. And so when people saw that, they said, "Oh man, Joel's here. It's going to be a great game." And then they were misled, and when leaks were found, they showed Joel's death scene and they knew exactly when it happened in the game, and they were able to figure out that it wasn't at all close to the scene that was being advertised in the trailer. Now, it's not so much harming people, but it did cause a lot of backlash, and people were very upset at this because he was a loved character and they were purposely misusing him and misadvertising it as he would be there for longer than he was. Another case I found is McDonald's marketing to kids with toys in their Happy Meals. Food at McDonald's is generally considered to be unhealthy, and it promotes obesity in children and adults. I found an article about a mom suing them over it. The organization, or this article, I should say, is from Emily Bryson York from the LA Times, and she writes, quote, "The organization had been threatening to sue McDonald's since last summer, claiming that the Happy Meal toys constitute a method of circumventing parental control and teach children unhealthy eating." Some other arguments that I found. In deontology, there really is no argument for misleading advertisement. It is the duty of the service provider to make sure the service being sold is not based on lies. It is not so much the consequences of what happens, but more so on the company itself to make sure that the product they are advertising is 100% what it is and not something else. A utilitarian might argue that an advertisement can produce greater good. The example I use here is a healthier lifestyle using a pill that would also have people exercising and eating healthy to truly see the effects of it. Now, most of the time, a utilitarian would agree that misleading advertisement is not good. But if it does promote healthy eating and something that's good for majority of society, there is a case and a argument to be made that it was the right decision to do that. So basically, to sum it all up, utilitarian and deontology are both ethical theories. that look at misleading advertisement as something that shouldn't be done. It's not something that is right. It purposely harms people just for the sake that a company makes more money. I also agree with that it is not something that should ever be done. And instead, a company should be promoting a product and making sure that the product they ship out is the product they are promoting. It is not something based on lies or profit or anything else. It is the duty of that company to make sure that what they're selling is what they're selling and not built something or based on something else.